My name is Claire Donovan. For 20 years, my family taught me a lesson I didn't realize I was learning. No matter what they did, I'd forgive them. Miss my birthday? I'd forgive them. Forget my daughter? I'd forgive them. Break another promise? I'd forgive them again. Then one night, after the worst betrayal of all, I blocked every number. My mother, my father, my sister, everyone. 3 months later, they started calling from strangers' phones. Because suddenly, they needed something only I could give them. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't answer. I was 39 years old when I finally understood my role in the family. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the priority. I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the forgiving one, the one everyone expected to understand. And for most of my life, I did. My younger sister, Brooke Donovan, had a gift. No matter what happened, she was never responsible. Late rent? Someone helped. Car payment? Dad helped. Bad decision? Mom defended her. Meanwhile, every mistake I made became a life lesson. Every mistake Brooke made became an emergency. I wish that had been the worst part. On my 36th birthday, nobody called. Not Mom, not Dad, not Brooke. By evening, I convinced myself they were planning a surprise. At 9 o'clock, I checked Facebook. They were all at a restaurant celebrating Brooke's promotion. My birthday wasn't mentioned once. That hurt more than I admitted. The next day, Mom finally called. We got busy. That was it. No apology, no guilt. Just, we got busy. When I sounded upset, she sighed. Claire, you're too sensitive. I heard those words my entire life. My daughter Emma was 8 when she started noticing things. One afternoon she asked, "Why do Grandma and Grandpa always go to Aunt Brooke's house?" I froze. Kids notice everything, even things adults try to ignore, especially those things. A year later, Emma had her first dance recital. Mom promised she'd come. Dad promised too. Brooke even texted, "Wouldn't miss it." Emma talked about it for weeks. She picked flowers for Grandma, saved seats, counted days. I should have known better. The recital started. The seats stayed empty. Emma kept turning around, looking toward the door, waiting. Every time it opened, her face lit up, then fell again. By intermission, she stopped looking. That broke my heart. 2 hours later, Mom sent a heart emoji. Nothing else. Dad blamed traffic. Brooke said, "Things came up." The same night, Brooke posted beach photos online. She wasn't stuck in traffic. She wasn't busy. She wasn't even in town. That night, Emma sat quietly in the car, then asked, "Do they not like us?" I almost pulled over, because no parent wants to hear that, especially when they don't know how to answer. I told her, "They love us." But even I wasn't sure anymore. 3 months later, Mom called. Her voice sounded unusually warm. "We need a fresh start." Dad agreed. Brooke agreed. They wanted a family dinner, a healing dinner, an apology dinner. At least that's how they described it. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. That was my mistake. The restaurant was already full when I arrived. Mom, Dad, Brooke, Brooke's husband Ryan. Everyone was seated. Everyone looked strangely serious. Then I noticed something sitting in the middle of the table, a large folder. That immediately made me nervous. I sat down and waited. Nobody apologized. Not for Emma's recital, not for the birthdays, not for anything. Instead, Dad pushed the folder toward me. "Let's take care of this tonight." My stomach dropped. Take care of what? I opened the folder. Property documents, sale agreements, inspection reports, buyer information. I frowned, then saw a familiar address. My grandmother's house. The house she'd lived in for 40 years. The house she'd loved more than anything. What's this? Mom smiled nervously. Just paperwork. Brooke added, We already handled everything else. Then Dad said, We just need your signature. Just need your signature. Those 4 words changed everything. I looked closer, then froze, because my name appeared several times, not as a witness, not as a relative, as executor. I read it again, executor of estate. I stared at Dad. What is this? Nobody answered immediately. That silence told me more than words. Why does this say I'm the executor? Mom sighed dramatically. As usual, you're focusing on the wrong thing. The wrong thing? I had apparently been given a legal responsibility nobody mentioned for years, and somehow I was the problem. That was my second warning. Brooke reached for her water glass. Her hands were shaking. Then she accidentally said, The buyer already paid a deposit. The room froze. So did I. Buyer? Deposit? They had already made promises. Without me. Suddenly everything made sense. The healing dinner, the sudden kindness, the invitations, the fake concern. This wasn't reconciliation. This was business. They didn't invite me because they missed me. They invited me because they needed me. And those are very different things. When I refused to sign immediately, Mom leaned back. Then said the words she'd used my entire life. Don't make this difficult. I almost laughed. Because every time I asked questions, I became difficult. Every time I wanted honesty, I became difficult. I was tired of being difficult. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. An elderly woman spoke softly. Claire? Yes. My name is Margaret Lewis. The name meant nothing to me. Then she said, I live next door to your grandmother for 22 years. I sat up immediately. What she said next changed everything. I think your family is hiding something from you. I pulled my car into a parking lot and listened. Margaret Lewis had been Grandma's neighbor for over 2 decades. She wasn't calling to gossip. I could hear that immediately. She sounded concerned. Then she asked, Did they tell you about the key? I frowned. What key? Silence. Then Margaret sighed. They really didn't tell you anything. That afternoon, I drove to Grandma's neighborhood. Margaret met me on her porch. She was kind, the kind of person who notices everything. After a few minutes, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was an old brass key. Your grandmother left this with me. My pulse quickened. Why? Margaret looked me directly in the eye. She said one day you'd need it. The house looked exactly the same. White shutters, blue front door, rose bushes along the walkway. For a moment I could almost hear Grandma laughing from the kitchen. Then reality returned. My family was trying to sell this place. And I still didn't know why they had hidden so much from me. The key opened a small locked drawer inside Grandma's bedroom, a drawer I didn't even know existed. Inside were folders, receipts, tax records, insurance papers, and one handwritten envelope. My name was written across the front. My hands started shaking. That was the day I removed Brooke as backup executor. I read it again, then froze, because the next line was even worse. If Claire ever refuses a property sale, her decision overrides every other family member. My stomach dropped. Suddenly the family dinner made sense. They didn't need my opinion. They needed my approval. And according to Grandma, they could never sell the house without it. Attached to Grandma's letter was the signed amendment. Official. Filed. Final. Brooke had been removed 3 years earlier, and the authority had been given to me alone. Grandma had already seen what nobody else wanted to see. This wasn't a sudden family conflict. It was a pattern she'd documented years ago. And now I finally understood why they were so desperate. They didn't need me to agree. They needed me to surrender. Then I found another folder. Medical notes, visitor logs, care records. Something caught my attention immediately. Brooke's name barely appeared. Almost never. Yet for years my parents told relatives Brooke was Grandma's primary caregiver. The paperwork told a very different story. A phone number was clipped to one document. I called. A former hospice nurse answered. After verifying who I was, she spoke carefully. Then said, "Your grandmother talked about you constantly." I swallowed hard. The nurse continued, "You were there more than anyone. More than anyone, not Brooke, not my parents. Me." Then I found another stack. Property tax payments, utility bills, home repairs. Many carried my name. Checks I'd forgotten about years ago. Small amounts, large amounts, emergency expenses, all documented. Meanwhile, Brooke had been telling everyone she sacrificed the most. The receipts proved otherwise. That evening, I forwarded everything to an attorney. An hour later, he called back. His voice sounded serious. Very serious. Then he asked, "Claire, did you ever send authorization to sell the property last year?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." A long pause followed. Then he said, "Because there's an email in the file claiming you did." My stomach dropped, because I already knew the answer. I had never sent it, which meant somebody else had. And suddenly, this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something much bigger. The next morning, I met with the attorney. His name was Daniel Cross. He spread several documents across his desk, then pointed to the email authorization. At first glance, it looked genuine. My name, my email address, my signature block. Everything appeared normal, until he showed me the metadata. The email had never come from my account. I stared at the screen. Then Daniel said, "Claire, whoever submitted this knew exactly what they were doing." My stomach twisted. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't family drama. Someone deliberately tried to make it look like I approved the sale. Someone expected nobody to check. They were wrong. The next morning, Daniel called. "Claire, I found something." The forged authorization wasn't random. Whoever created it knew details from private estate records. Then he said, "They weren't trying to fake your approval." I frowned. Then what were they doing? Daniel paused. "They were trying to bypass your authority." Daniel forwarded another document. I opened it. Then froze. The wording matched an old estate amendment. The same amendment where Brooke lost her backup executor status. Then I saw the clause. If Claire ever refuses a property sale, her decision overrides every other family member. Everything clicked. The dinner, the pressure, the buyer, the forged email. They knew they couldn't sell the house without me. So someone tried to create the one thing they didn't have. My approval. Mom eventually left a voicemail. "Claire, please call us." No apology, no accountability, just urgency. Then another message arrived. "You're making this worse." I laughed. Because according to my family, the person exposing the problem was always the problem, never the people creating it. That evening, my Aunt Carol called. Normally, she never got involved. This time was different. She sounded confused. Then she asked, "Why are you trying to stop the sale?" I froze, because I hadn't told anyone. Then she explained. My parents had spent weeks telling relatives that I was refusing to cooperate out of spite. Another lie. One more to add to the pile. The interesting thing about liars is they panic when facts appear. Within days, my family's story started changing. First, they claimed I approved everything. Then they claimed I forgot. Then they claimed I misunderstood. Every version contradicted the previous one. People started noticing, especially relatives. One evening, my daughter Emma found me reviewing documents. She sat quietly beside me, then asked, "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at you?" I smiled sadly. "No." She thought for a moment, then said, "They're mad because you said no." Kids understand things adults complicate, and she was absolutely right. A week later, I returned to Grandma's house, this time alone. I walked through every room slowly, the kitchen, the living room, the garden. Every corner held memories. Then I realized something. Nobody in my family was fighting for the house. They were fighting for the money. Grandma deserved better than that. If someone spent years taking advantage of your kindness, would you keep giving chances? Comment: enough is enough. That night, I made my choice. The sale wasn't happening. Not now. Maybe not ever. The next morning, Daniel filed the paperwork freezing the transaction completely. The buyer withdrew. The title company halted everything. And within hours, my parents, my sister, and 3 different relatives were pounding on my front door. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't open it. The knocking lasted almost 20 minutes. Mom, Dad, Brooke, even Brooke's husband. Nobody left. Nobody stopped. For years, I would have opened the door immediately. Not this time. I sat on the couch beside Emma and listened. Then eventually, they drove away. And for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. The next few weeks were strange. My family couldn't reach me, so they got creative. Unknown numbers, co-workers' phones, friends' phones, even distant relatives. The messages all sounded different, but they meant the same thing. They needed something. And suddenly, I was important again. One voicemail caught my attention. Dad sounded desperate. "Claire, please call us." Not because he missed me, not because he was sorry, because the buyer was threatening legal action. The deposit had already been spent, and nobody knew how to repay it, especially Brooke. 3 days later, Brooke appeared at my office. She looked exhausted, nothing like her usual confident self. Then she finally admitted the truth. Part of the buyer's deposit was gone: vacation expenses, credit card debt, home renovations, money she'd already spent, money she never should have touched. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. A month later, several relatives requested a family meeting. Not my parents, not Brooke, the relatives. Because nobody knew who was telling the truth anymore. For once, I agreed to attend, not for reconciliation, for clarity. That was a very different thing. The meeting took place at a community center. Everyone expected an argument. Instead, I brought Grandma's letter. When my turn came, I unfolded the pages, then read the first line aloud. "Claire, you were the only one who kept showing up." The room became silent, completely silent. Then I read the rest. The visits, the appointments, the bills, the sacrifices. Everything Grandma documented herself. No exaggeration, no emotion, just facts. When I finished, several relatives were crying. Aunt Carol looked directly at Brooke, then asked, "Why did we hear a different story all these years?" Nobody answered, because nobody could. After the meeting, Mom approached me privately. For the first time, she looked older, tired. Then she said, "We made mistakes." I waited. She said nothing else. No accountability, no ownership, just vague regret. 20 years ago, that would have been enough. Not anymore. "You didn't make mistakes," I replied. "You made choices." Then I walked away. 6 months later, Grandma's house looked completely different. Fresh paint, restored gardens, updated interiors. Instead of selling it, I converted it into a rental property. The income went into a dedicated account. Not for me. For Emma. College. Opportunities. Security. Grandma would have loved that. People often assume revenge is loud, angry, dramatic. Mine wasn't. I didn't destroy anyone. I didn't scream. I didn't humiliate anyone. I simply stopped rescuing people who kept hurting me. The phone stopped ringing eventually. The guilt disappeared, the pressure faded, and the peace remained. For 20 years, my family broke promises because they believed I would always forgive them. Then I stopped answering, and they learned something too late. Silence can be louder than revenge.